Good morning. The Committee of the Whole will be back on order as soon as we get a quorum and everyone shows up. All right? Thank you. We'll stay on recess at this time. Committee of the Whole is called to order. We have quorum. We will now continue on with our second round, and we will begin with Senator Lujan. Do you have any questions for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I have a couple questions. Thank you very much. Good morning, gentlemen. Ma'am, good morning. Mr. Burns, good morning. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Senator.
How are you doing?
Okay.
Good?
I'm good, thank
Nice
you.
and fresh as everybody else, right? There we go. Mr. Burns, let me ask you, yesterday, we, I think a couple of other colleagues asked regarding the ARP funds. There's, you said roughly about 220 million that's there?
Yeah, 228.
Yeah, and this LEAP program basically is a program that qualifies under the ARP funding for distribution, right? It qualifies under that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay. Alongside other programs, I guess, as defined as what these monies are qualified to be distributed to?
Yeah, all the programs that you actually can see them in BBMR's LEAP report that just came out. All those programs qualify.
Okay. Are the 220 million that's and you said it's collecting interest at this point? It's in an interest-bearing account, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay.
And thank you. I went and looked at the report after yesterday's session, and you can see the interest on that report.
What is the total amount of the interest incurred to date?
It's on that report. It's 670,000.
670,000?
Yes, sir.
670,000. 670,000, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's on the
Point of inquiry.
BBMR's monthly ARP report.
Point of inquiry.
Yes, Senator Blas.
With regard to the report, thank you very much, Mr. Byrne. Is there a way we can get a copy of that while we have this discussion?
Do you know, Mr. Byrne, if that's been transmitted to the legislature?
Yes, sir, it has.
Okay, then we'll just ask the clerk if they can pull it up and send you all.
Yeah. Can we get a recess then? Do we get it? Yeah, because I'm kind of basing some of my questions based on that.
Okay, as long as you understand that ARP is with the governor, it's not with us. It's not our.
No. I understand.
Okay,
I
as long as we
understand.
understand that.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll have a quick recess, and we'll get that document to everyone. Thank you. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. It's under messages and communication. My colleagues, please have your staff or yourself go into messages and communication when we get it, because everybody has access to that. but we're gonna try to assist you in getting it. But please be mindful that many messages come in, sent to the speaker, sent to the Committee on Rules, and it's sent out. You just need to be on top of that. Thank you. We're back to recess. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. Senator Luan, do you have any other questions you want to pose to the
Thank you.
panel? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's going to take me a little while to decipher all this, but anyway, that being said, I know there's a resolution that we had, I think I submitted already, Senator, or Leader Blas, that in regards to asking the governor again to carve out from the ARP funds, this money's to fully fund this LEAP program, as well as the subsidy for the folks for the power bill. And so anyway, that being said, just looking at this just real quick, I have to shift a little bit. I know this was given by the Bureau of Budget and Management, but maybe Mr. Burns, I don't know if you can answer this question, but you know, there was $2.5 million that's been allocated and I guess transferred already, expended to the tier two clinics.
I recall that.
Yeah, I recall that.
Senator,
Okay,
yes.
and it has been paid, right? It has been transferred to the tier 2 clinics.
That's my recollection.
Yeah. Okay. You know, now is that all the funding? I mean, is that all done then? I mean, all of them are paid off?
As far as I know.
Okay, because, you know, I kind of dispute that because I just got, actually, I know of a tier 2 clinic that's owed about $2.3 million and has yet to be paid.
As far as I know, and my recollection is of a discussion and commitment that arose several months ago.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, that this was done as a grant. It wasn't meant to represent necessarily a repayment of costs. It was a grant made to the clinic, and it was a fixed amount for each clinic, and that's why I believe it's a round sum of 2.5 million.
Okay, yeah, but like I said, the information that I got, meeting with the owners of actually it's American Medical Center or clinic, that said they haven't got a penny, haven't received a penny, and to date, what they've been owed, or what they're owed, is around $2.3 million for that. But anyway.
I would have to check, but I believe they were paid.
They were paid?
At some time, either under CARES or under ARP. But I would have to check that.
Okay, okay, yeah. Well, you know, at this point, again, because we already have a resolution and requesting the governor again to pay out the LEAP, this program, basically this bill that we're discussing, as well as another bill that we'll be discussing to carve that out from the ARP funds. And I know it's at the discretion of the governor at this point. And just reading through the allocations and some of the expenditures already, I'll have to take a little time here to really research this, because there's some questionable amounts here. But anyway, that being said, I'm done there, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Luan. Senator Brown, do you have any questions for the panel?
Sure, unless we knew for sure money's going to keep falling from the sky, I guess I wouldn't have any questions. But, you know, in all this discussion, I just want to make sure, because this is not the only bill that we're looking at. I mean, there's another bill to fund, to see if we can offset, again, the power bills as well. And those are both high price tag items, and very supportive, obviously, of assisting our private sector and our community as we now hopefully are at the tail end of this whole pandemic issue. But I'm still trying to understand, with regards to the shortfalls that we have in our other accounts. I mean, how are we going to address those shortfalls? To me, they're already showing the special funds. To me, that's an indicator of our local activity. And as we've discussed before, Mr. Burns, I mean, we recognize the federal infusion, the massive federal infusion of funds that we've had into our government. But, you know, that's starting to wane. And yet, you know, we, and some with the help of members of this legislature, put additional burdens on the people of Guam, quite sizable amounts. And we discussed the last time you were here how we were going to address moving forward to continue to pay those obligations. Now we're a little about a month past that time, and I'm getting a sense that we're not going to have the continued flow of revenue. You mentioned yesterday we might have maybe 10 million more a month. I mean, how do you gauge that? And are you looking at this additional 10 million you think we're going to get in excess leading up towards the end of this fiscal year? And where do you think that's coming from?
An estimate, Senator, is an estimate, as my colleague from OFB spoke about at some length yesterday. An estimate is as good as the person that makes it, and as he most accurately said, it depends a point in time. It can vary from one point in time to another. That's just a best estimate at this time, which was what I was asked to provide.
Well, and I guess that's where the challenge is, because we're trying to make decisions that have actual figures and commitments, and financial commitments that need to be made if we're going to make these decisions on estimates. And I'm gauging that we're starting to feel the downturn. And that's what concerns me, because certainly while we want to continue to appropriate money, and shortly we'll be going into the budget for the new fiscal year, I'm a little concerned that everything's not going to add up. If we don't have enough money on the table now to fully fund this issue with regards to the LEAP for our private sector, and then we have questions whether or not we have money left or remaining to address extending the credit on the power bill, that's an immediate future that we're looking at these amounts of money. I mean, a little over, closer to $50 million again. So I don't walk away, and I've been listening to the discussions and questions with my other colleagues, that we actually are going to have that revenue amount, and that we're probably going to be looking at cuts, or if we don't put the cuts in the budget, just things that are not going to get paid moving forward. So that's my challenge. We have very set figures that we're being asked to appropriate, but we're doing it on a wing and a prayer here, and that's very concerning.
It certainly wouldn't be my goal or my wish or even my effort to be in a position where we cannot pay out all the obligations that we have. I've been in that position before. It wasn't a very enviable position to be in, and we've made a lot of effort to make sure that that position never occurs again. So I'm not going to sit in front of you and tell you that an obligation, never do I want to say that an obligation has not been paid if I knew about it, right? Sometimes obligations seem to just appear out of nowhere. Yeah. This bill, and I believe its companion bill, the wording has been changed to recognize the possibility of the funds not being realized, and both of them refer to the flow of funds as they occur. So if they don't occur, I can only assume that the expenditure will not be made, and that is a deficit avoiding process.
Well, and that's already giving us, and I guess the public, red light signals, that the party may be over fairly shortly if we're not able to address that. And even more so, again, with the special funds, as we previously discussed, what was the shortfall collectively in the special funds for last fiscal year?
We're still finalizing figures, but it was about $6 million.
For last fiscal year?
For fiscal 22.
And what are you looking at so far now in this current? I know we're almost getting into the third quarter, almost, we got 5 months left of this fiscal year or so. What are we tracking now?
We're actually tracking a little bit better. As Senator Taitagui pointed out, the shortfall in revenues was something like 8 million, but if you also look at the reductions in expenditures, that comes down to around about 6 million too. And I expect, as we go through the remaining months, because that was based upon the report to April, as we go through the remaining months, some of that imbalance will be corrected.
And how do you think that's going to happen?
Well,
the imbalance you're referring to, how do you think that's going to be corrected?
Some of that expenditure is forecast to be higher in certain months than others, and some of those months, I think I mentioned, that was, of course, in reference to general fund collections, that February and March are not good collection months, but April is.
That's a tax
May and June,
month, right?
May and June generally are. August is usually not a good one, and September, because that's the end of another quarter, is usually a much more acceptable one. Again, it's an estimate where any business, any government has to rely upon estimates at some time, because otherwise you wouldn't move until the end of the year.
Well, then, it's a question of, are we estimating on the high end, or are we being conservative? Because as you mentioned, the fact that we've gone through challenging times, that's actually been the standard for the government of Guam, is going through challenging times. And I think we're going to go back shortly to that with additional obligations that our people have been burdened with. What do you gauge as the reason for the shortfalls in the special funds?
They're special funds, right? The special funds were originally set up, I can surmise, with the purpose of ring-fencing certain revenues so that they could only be used on certain expenditures. That worked when the general fund was in deficit, because those funds were protected. That's why property tax is not in the general fund, it's in the TEF fund. Customs and quarantine has its own fund because it relies upon the contributions from visitors. Tourist attraction fund is a special fund because it has a dedicated revenue source, that is the hotel tax. That worked when the general fund was in deficit, because it was made sure that that process prevented revenues being siphoned off into the general fund. Unfortunately, those revenues come from certain specific revenue sources. I've mentioned some. The highway fund came, basically that until the recent law changed that for this year, that came from gas tax. Mm-hmm. So these consumption-based revenues are subject to changes in the levels of those revenues.
Well, I kind of look at them as indicators of activity in our local community in terms of, because of actually where the source of those funds are coming from. For me, it kind of gives me a gauge, is our activity increasing or decreasing? And obviously, areas that you mentioned, more than likely decreasing. So.
Well, the Tourist Attraction Fund, which is, one of the bellwether funds, if you like, actually was showing in the April report an increase in revenues over the estimate. And
that revenue will go back into GVB, though. It isn't going to offset anything else in the government that may be
I'm sure
lower.
GVB will use it wisely.
I hope so. Again, I realize we've been at this game a long time, me longer than you with regards to government of Guam appropriations, but I just don't feel comfort level. We're doing these estimates with the hope that, we're going to continue to get these additional excess funds, and I'm gauging with activity out there, things are going to be slowing down. And like I said, I think this legislature, with the administration, for those that have voted for it, have put substantial increased burdens on our ratepayers out there. And we're going to end up finding out some critical things that we really do need to fund. We're going to end up having to not fund them or address cuts in the future, and that's what my gauge is. So we'll see. We'll see, Mr. Burns, how our estimates turned out. Thank you very much for responding to my questions.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Vice Speaker?
Situs Masi, Mr. Chair, and Manana Situs, to each and every one of you and my colleagues. Mr. Chair, as I look at the legislation as proffered in front of us and the extension for this local employers assistance program that we call LEAP, and seeing what it has done in the past, again, I want to reiterate that as we look at this proposal, it gives the opportunity with the language contained in this bill, the flexibility to work with the different stakeholders and, of course, the administration to implement the program that most effectively uses the financial resources that are to be allocated, and the provisions in this legislation. And as we look at providing this program for our business folks, I want to ask Mr. Byrne, the Department of Administration, does he believe that the parameters of the legislation as provided will that, I guess, work with the fiscal responsibility on both ends as we look at moving forward and what have anticipated that has been received by our government coffers to work not just this bill, but the bill upcoming in this session floor?
Thank you, Senator. You know, in the past, when an appropriation was made, but the revenues didn't reach the level by which that appropriation could be fully made, it was a problem for the administration because the cash wasn't there, although the appropriation required that cash effectively be paid out. That's what happened when we had a deficit. This wording it takes that responsibility, thank you, away from me, because it puts it back into the law that if the revenues don't arise, then the expenditure isn't to be made. And that's a very helpful and I think a very realistic recognition of the situation that might occur if the more pessimistic forecasts turn out to be the case, which we all hope that it won't, but there is a possibility that could happen.
Oh, thank you for your comments, Mr. Byrne. I think in this efforts and working closely with my colleagues and the sponsors of this legislation, and of course the other proposed legislation that's on the floor with us today, I think as we look at providing, I wouldn't call it a safety net, but a recovery period for our business vendors, our businesses out there, but more importantly, also our residents. I think that the proposed legislations in front of us today is a positive step in the right direction to help our community as a whole. And as and again, I keep trying to talk about the other legislation that's also on session floor with us. I think that what we've provided, or the author of this legislation, was really mindful or keen to making sure that if it's there, based on what we've received, based on what we're trending, based on what we're going to get, that let's stay optimistic and give back to our community until we can finally get on our feet. So Mr. Chair, I still support the efforts of not just this legislation, but the next legislation, and I think that based on the numbers coming in and what was provided for us, that this can still work. So I yield back to you, Mr. Chair, and just share those thoughts with you based on the comments that has been presented to us. Senator Masi.
Thank you, Madam Vice. Being that we're done with the second row, Senator Frank Lujan, Frank Blas, correction, do you have any questions for the panel? Senator Blas? I almost gave you a Lujan, but it's okay.
Okay.
You're okay. You're okay, Primo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, and I appreciate, the conversations that we had, and it just dawned on me, and I just got to make this open remark. We're sitting here and we're trying to find a way to be able to get funds that our community needs to be able to survive. And mind you, just listening to the tone of the conversation, and I appreciate you, Mr. Byrne, that the language provides some respite in that as funds are available. And I agree with you, okay, that's something that's manageable. But God help us if we do that for legislation or for appropriations to a government entity. God help us if we say that we'll provide the appropriations to this government entity, provided when funds are available. It's almost sacrilegious to be able to do that. It just struck me. This is an island. This is the people that we govern are the people that expect us and mind us to be able to take care of them. And we struggle to be able to fulfill this, I don't even want to say promise, it's almost an obligation to be able to help our people. While there is another funding source that's available that we can't discuss on this floor. I want to focus on Mr. With Gita, all right? You had mentioned that the LEAP program, there were parameters that were set based on criteria or based on other things just to ensure that we get to those businesses that you truly see that they have issues or problems in as far as surviving, but do we also take into consideration, into account those businesses that seemingly look like they are able to manage, but it was because that they had to make some really substantive changes to their operations that they survived, so it didn't look like they were just as harmed as other businesses?
Good morning, Senator. Thank you for the question. What we did with LEAP was, and actually with every program, was we really wanted to look at what was the most quantifiable way of verifying that they suffered a business loss. And really the only way to do it, several things were brought up. Do we look at increased expenses? Do we look at decrease in operations? But the way we really determined we could do it was looking at changes in revenue over the set period of time. Okay. In that way, we were able to determine whether a business suffered, we call it business interruption, but it's basically a business loss over a set period of time. So we have used that consistently with every single program because it's the easiest, it is the most direct way for us to show it in a quantifiable manner. But that being said, we do acknowledge that, especially in particular with this new program, we do know that the pace of tourism recovery is still slower than we would like. We know that the Asian market, based on everything GVB has said, is not recovering as fast as other parts of the world, so which is one factor. And then, of course, everyone here individually has suffered the impacts of inflation. That has also impacted, business costs as well. So we took all of that into consideration in our proposed program that, if funded, we can push out.
Okay. Well, I bring about this as a suggestion, and I can appreciate that in the legislation we want to make the policy as broad as possible, so that you can, and operationally, you can look at different ways to be able to administer it. I agree, and I some of the concerns of my colleague from Santa Rita. Chris, you are from Santa Rita, right? No? From Zonia? From Guam? Okay. I'm trying to get back to proper protocol, not mentioning names. But there was some. If you look at it at face value, you look at who many of the business or most of the business. I don't want to say most of the business, but a great number of businesses who received it. You kind of wondered, okay, yeah, they did suffer the loss, but what kind of businesses were they running? And I understand that. But I also would like to suggest that we take a look at, even if the business you didn't see the loss there, the losses weren't realized because they had to restructure okay, or look at other ways to be able to keep themselves afloat. So if we can, and I don't see that there's a need to amend the legislation to do that. I would rather not do that and leave that up to Gita to be able to look into that. Is that something that can be done?
I think, Senator, well, let me, what happened with what at GITA, the board actually did meet and adopt an SOP for the new program.
Okay.
So that everything is kind of set in stone in anticipation of funding being, whatever amount of funding being awarded. Now, that being said, of course, Senator, if there are suggestions that you would like to make, we're very welcome to, communicating and talking with you on that. And then we could see if adjustments to the SOP and the program parameters would be made depending on that discussion and those suggestions.
Yeah, again, I don't find it necessary to make an amendment to the legislation to be able to provide that. We want to keep that as broad. Yeah, I don't want to piss the author off too much. Okay. Mr. Byrne, in the discussion with regards to the special funds, and as far as any anticipated shortfall, do we anticipate shortfall in the special funds?
Senator, as I indicated, in some, but not all.
Okay, but in some total, what do you anticipate? Recognizing, this is, we're talking without a crystal ball. What is it that you
I think in response to a previous senator, I anticipated about $6 million.
$6 million, okay. Is there already discussions in the administration as how to be able to make up for that $6 million shortfall without coming to us and asking us for a $6 million appropriation?
It's a special fund, so no, there hasn't been that discussion at this moment.
Okay. I think that in anticipation for the discussions in the budget, if we can prepare, some forecast as to where we may have the shortfall so that we know what services may be impacted by this. I don't ask for it now, but in anticipation for that.
Okay, thank you. We will do that.
Appreciate that. Because I think the other thing that we're also going to need to anticipate is, like you said, unfortunately, we don't know what's going to happen down the future, but we can almost foresee some of the things that may be happening. Such as with the Guam Memorial Hospital. It really concerns me when I have a $37 million figure that's floating around in the community as far as a shortfall. And we're going to have to deal with that sometime, and whether or not we have the ability to be able to address that. Do you agree?
Obviously, if there's an issue, we don't want it floating around unaddressed. Yes, we want to address it. Just to put on the record, the GMH is neither the general fund nor a special fund. It's a component unit of the government of Guam and does its own financials. Of course, that doesn't change the figures. It's just a different approach.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And then on top of that, the other $14 million elephant that we haven't talked about yet is how to be able to make up for funding that we've lost with regard to compact impact reimbursement that we would have anticipated we could have used in next year's budget. Right?
Yes, and the governor is working very hard to make sure that we don't lose it.
And I tell you what, I'm going to express my desire and my I like to be able to work with you and the administration, the governor, to be able to see if we can recoup that.
And I believe the congressman has been very active in that too.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. See, I didn't get mad.
Thank you, Senator Blas. Senator Duenas, do you have any questions for the panel? No questions? Senator Barnett, do you have any questions?
I don't have a question, Mr. Chair, but I just would like to, if I may, for the record, read this press release that was issued. This is a press release out of the Office of the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, dated May 10th, 2023. Administration cautions against deficit spending. I kind of thought about doing a dramatic reading, but I'm just going to read it straight through. Office of the Governor issues the following statement on the anticipated discussions on Bill number 83-37 LS relative to energy credits and Bill number 7537 LS relative to the Local Employer Assistance Program, LEAP. Open quote, yesterday senators discussed a bill that would appropriate funds toward the Local Employers Assistance Program, LEAP, to provide businesses with another round of grant funding. As discussed at session, there are not enough funds to support both this bill and another that proposes to extend the energy credit program for another 5 rounds, providing $500 relief to all ratepayers. While our administration agrees with the intent of both efforts, entertaining 2 competing measures simultaneously without a sufficient funding source is a poor fiscal policy and reverts GovGuam into its past habitual deficit spending. Our administration has exercised sound fiscal practices that have eliminated the massive GovGuam deficit we inherited and have consistently generated millions of dollars more in annual revenue. Despite the tens of millions the legislature has spent for this fiscal year above the originally adopted levels, some funding is still available. This is due to the solid fiscal management that our administration has maintained, end quote, end of release. So I guess, Mr. Byrne, it is frustrating because we want to be able to do both, but you know, my line of questioning yesterday was that, and you agreed that, and I think your words were, should the governor choose to do so, that this LEAP program could be funded entirely by the ARP funds. Is that correct?
She has discretion for the ARP funding.
So how do we make this work? Because I definitely don't want the administration to make us go sit in the corner and face the wall for, you know, what they call deficit spending. So is there any way that we could, sorry, is there any way that, you know, maybe the governor in all her good grace could up the ante on the ARP funds so that we then use the general fund to provide the much needed assistance to all of the ratepayers? Because, you know, we're in a difficult spot now where we're getting lectured from the Office of the Governor, but it's just a little ironic to me because they have the ability to remedy this situation by just using more of the ARP funds.
She's already making a contribution, as you acknowledge, Senator. She certainly could, but as I pointed out yesterday, I think that would be the expense of some other program. And where would those funds come from? You know, the way the funds have been allocated and on occasion reallocated where the necessity has arisen, it really was set to meet a particular issue. If an issue doesn't present itself, and you know, you'll have to determine whether this is an issue or not, then there wouldn't seem to be a good reason for reallocating the funding, which we've talked about uncertainties. Those that are relying on these funds in their future plans, if we change it, that's an uncertainty.
But it's very certain that according to the allowable uses of the American Rescue Plan funds, that this LEAP program certainly could be funded 100% with the ARP, right?
There's no prohibition in the final rule against that use.
And the way you described this $5 million, this isn't just a withdrawal from the a bank of $5 million in ARP funding. This is it. You kind of made it seem like they had to search the couch for this $5 million, look under the cushions and look at these funds that Gita, if I'm not mistaken, hadn't spent yet that had been previously allocated. So this wasn't like, go to the ATM, take out $5 million, this is going to be for the LEAP. This was like, oh, there's 300,000 here, look under this cushion, oh, it's, 50,000.
Yes, and that's the reason why I said, that if we looked elsewhere, it would reduce another program. These are GITA programs that weren't spent, so it's a GITA program being funded by a GITA ARP allocation.
Because it's almost a case of like, damned if we do, damned if we don't, and when you talk about these ARP funds being allocated, that doesn't necessarily mean that anything is set in stone with those funds, right? It just means that it's an idea, it's a thought that this much is going to go over here, this much is going to go over there.
Well, it's an allocation, and those to whom it's been allocated reasonably rely on that allocation. As I said, in this particular, or as you said, actually, in this particular case, if there's an underspend that's been identified, and there has been some underspend identified on some GITA programs, that was used, that was used because it became available. Basically, if it's not an underspend and it's already allocated and the agency or the program relies upon that, it's not available.
Right. So, I mean, because we don't have the ability nor the authority to kind of go down and look at, not like the general fund, if things are allocated or otherwise obligated, we can kind of go down and say, okay, we'll take from here and we'll move this over there and do this and that and kind of get creative, right? But we're not able to do that with the ARP funding because maybe if you could just share a little bit more about where some of those allocations are going.
Well, it's in that report. So it's a very comprehensive report, and you can see
This is the one.
it's the report. I don't have the cover, but
So I mean,
it's
I
a report
guess just
dated
in order
April
of
30th.
importance, help us out here. What would you say? Is there anywhere that we can unallocate so that we can preserve the ability to fund both the LEAP and the energy credit?
Senator, they're all important.
Yeah, I mean, but so are these two bills we're discussing. I mean, you know where I'm coming from. It's like we want to get creative, but we also don't, I don't like getting chewed out by the governor, lieutenant governor. So what do we do here? What's your solution? What do you propose?
To prevent you being chewed out.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be way beyond my talents to do that.
Yeah, so what would you do in our situation, Mr. Byrne?
I'm okay with the situation as it is. Just like it would be, some senators have advocated against overspending some programs. These programs fall into that same category. Until facts prove otherwise, and I'm not aware of any facts that so far have, these programs need to be spent at the appropriate time to meet the goal of ARP funding.
Is there a scenario that exists, in your opinion, that would allow us to pass both these measures? Even with the Stern letter released from the governor, for us to be able to pass both these measures and have them be funded by the same funding source without, running into deficit spending, in your opinion?
Well, in these two, and I earnestly hope that wording survives through this committee to the vote. The way the wording is currently framed, there is a kind of mechanism that prevents that happening.
Right.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, so why did we get this release then, if you're okay with that? Because I just assumed yesterday that you were okay with it, so okay, we're okay with it, but now it just seems like the big boss is not okay with it.
Please don't change the wording. Maybe that's the message.
Point of information, Madam Chair.
Senator Duenas, minority, asked you to state your point of information.
Yeah, I
Please.
just wanted to address the chair to, along the line of the questioning of my good colleague. You may want to look at page 6 of 13, item 33. I think there's $160 million available there.
Oh, this is the new hospital money.
Noted. Senator Burnett, you
Right.
still have the floor.
So we couldn't take, 10 mil from the new hospital and put it back with some other money later?
Well, Senator Blas already expressed a concern about the finances for the current hospital. So that might, you could, but I think would possibly be assuming a risk that you might not otherwise want to assume.
I mean, it's just for me a little frustrating because, yeah, we are, and I get it, right? We are going to build a new hospital. So sorry about that Eagles Field thing, but the current hospital right now, I mean, I've seen the videos, the roof is leaking, and so I don't know if it would be great if we could just be a little more creative with this 160 mil. So I mean, I don't know what to say anymore, Mr. Byrne. I thought we had an understanding yesterday, and then, this kind of, so I just hope we still have an understanding, and I really hope that we can make this work. But I think the quick solution is that the, governor, lieutenant governor open up their collective purse and find some way to move some of the ARP funding around so that the people of Guam can get that much needed energy relief credit, because I'm just not comfortable being in the position where we're pitting the businesses against the people of Guam. I'm sure you understand.
So could I just make clear that ARP funding is not available for the energy credit because it's not a COVID
Right. Yeah,
related
so that's why it's important for her and Lieutenant Governor Josh to use ARP for the LEAP, because we've already established here on the record that it's a totally allowable use. If you could just put in a good word for the people of Guam, Mr. Byrne. That's all. I'd like to yield my 38 seconds to Speaker Terlai. Are we able to do that?
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you,
Barnett.
ma'am.
Yes, you can yield. Thank you. Speaker Teresa, I will acknowledge you at this time. Please
Thank you
proceed.
very much, Vice Speaker, and to the panel again for being here today and all your work yesterday. So, of course, we're trying to fund power relief, and we're trying to assist businesses with excess funds, right? And yesterday, you testified that you were comfortable estimating $10 million per month in excess funds until the end of the fiscal year, that would be sustainable, I think was your words, and that April is a good month, and that, and then you gave us an estimate of $18 million in excess funds for FY23, and we already know there was excess funds of FY22 of $15 million, that's why we put that into the power relief bill. And when we did the pay raises, we used the same mechanism. We used excess funds. And at that time, there was no caution or press release sent down to us telling us that we were deficit spending by paying those pay raises for GovGuam employees only. In fact, that's the time when I introduced this power relief bill, is because when we were going to take care of government and Guam employees, I thought we should take care of every family on Guam at the same time too, if we have excess funds. But today, of course, as my colleague read, we have a administration cautioning against deficit spending and actually saying there are not enough funds. That sounds actually contrary to what I thought we heard yesterday. They're saying that there's not enough funds for the power credit. There's the governor saying, and the lieutenant governor, that there is not enough funds for the assistance to businesses. That we paid GovGuam employee raises, and then we don't have enough funds for this type of aid. $500 for families for 5 months. That's all. But again, you told us we have $18 million in FY23 excess available, and we have $15 million in FY22 available, and that sounds like more than enough for power relief. And it would be more than enough if the governor would use her ARP for the LEAP, for the business program relief. Instead of asking the general fund to put in 15 while she puts in 5, that could be easily reversed. And we could take care of the businesses and the families on Guam. And I really just want to ask you, is passage of these two bills deficit spending? Is it the legislature that deficit spends? Or is it actually the governors, when they pay for business relief, if there's not enough general funds, and they use general funds, would that payment, that spending actually be the deficit spending? I don't believe a legislature deficit spends. We might make appropriations because we base them on estimates in excess of what we actually received. But the spending is not at all controlled by the legislature. Isn't that correct, Mr. Byrne?
Well, I'm speaking from...
That's what the courts have said.
Right, but from my own experience, it's really a shared effort, because I was in that position when I first moved into the job of not being able to pay out to certain agencies the entire amount of their appropriations. And coming to this hall, that wasn't really an acceptable thing to do. Senators didn't care for the fact that that was the case, even though I guess the facts determined that that was the case. So I would certainly not want to be in that position again.
Well-
So I honestly believe it's a shared responsibility.
It's definitely a shared responsibility to balance a budget, to estimate appropriately, and I believe that we have done that, and that is the reason why we have excess funds, because we have been very conservative in our estimates of funding, of revenue, and conservative in our appropriations as well. So for the last 3 years at least, since I've been here, we've had excess funds since 2018. And now we're trying to dictate where those are going to go towards some other expenditure or towards power relief for the families on Guam. Simple as that. And we as a legislature are trying to dictate that it goes there. You have estimated that there's more than enough money to go there. We have also found that the governor can use ARP to fund a LEAP program, a business assistance program, and that there's more than enough LEAP money, ARP money to do that as well, and it's completely eligible. But the legislature is trying to put some general funds towards that program as well. And you seemed to tell us yesterday that the mechanism that we have come up to put into these two bills is one that is trying to get this money to the people of Guam as fast as possible, as soon as it is received, instead of holding it and waiting for some other authorization. And I beg to differ that a legislature can deficit spend, because courts have told us over and over again, we do not control the cash, you do. And so if there's not enough cash, the bill before us says that you don't pay the businesses. But what we're proposing is that if there is not enough general funds to pay the businesses their business relief, then use the ARP. Very easy solution. And in the energy credit bill, it's very clear that there is enough money to pay for energy credit. There's enough FY22 for 3 months, and there is enough FY23 for the remainder 2 months. And there's also in that bill a transfer authority. So I think that the legislature has come up with mechanisms that say, Governor, we are giving you all these options. There is more than enough money to cover both of these programs, especially if you use ARP funds, then there is not even a debate. But I really find it, unsettling that we say we have more than enough to pay raises for GovGuam employees only, which they deserved. However, it's a small class of people on Guam. And when we're trying to take care of these other classes of people on Guam who also are still suffering from the pandemic, as testified by you yesterday, and are suffering from inflation and really at risk of having power disconnected because of the high power prices, we've come up with a mechanism. And we are going out of our way to find a way to get this done, to make sure that it's viable. And you've said it's viable. You've said it is sustainable until the end of the fiscal year, that we would be, and if your estimates are correct, then it's sustainable. And yet we get a letter that says, not enough funds, deficit spending. So I guess the choice will be up to the governor. Is she going to pay the power bills, or is she going to pay the business assistance, or is she going to use her ARP and make sure that all of these are taken care of? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Speaker. We'll now move to Senator San Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank my colleague for both the two previous colleagues that spoke. And as I do read the press release, and as Mr. Byrne, you brought up yesterday the anticipated and hopeful surplus that will come in. And I don't think nobody's ever taken a look into the account of the $42 million that is now circulating, that will generate revenue, correct? So being that, what would the estimate be roughly because 42 is going to circulate for the next 6 months. It's not one day. What would that generally account for? Another $1 million, $2 million, sir?
This is really off the top of estimate, but the income taxes on 42 million, generally are something like, say, 20%. So that would be like 8.5 million. And GRT, if it was all spent, and some of it might be saved, so let's be really conservative, might be another 3 million. So it's probably about 11 million that might well recirculate as a result of these government expenditures. Government expenditures are a large part of Guam's economy. The General Accounting Office, the Federal General Accounting Office recognizes this, and it kind of comes up in our census and in our annual BEA report that government spending is a large portion of the economy. So yes, some of it will recirculate,
Sir, and just knowing that, then if you add another 20 million onto that pie, and another 26 million onto that pie, then the surplus could actually grow to exactly the amount you anticipate, 10 million, versus I said, hopefully 5 is all I was asking for.
It's certainly an additive issue, not a deductive issue. It certainly moves it towards the optimistic and away from the pessimistic view.
Okay, and like I said, I like to thank my colleagues that mentioned earlier. This body has been very conservative when we pass budgets, and this will be my 5th year being the appropriation chair. And the OFB has been in business for the same time I've been in business in dealing with funds. And we've been very conservative. And in addition to the administration being financially, physically responsible, it prevented us going backwards in time and being a deficit. So I actually look forward to us passing this bill without any change. Because the way the bill is written, and Mr. Byrne, you can comment on it, the way the bill is written, when the funds become available, it goes in. And then Gita could also comment that you don't spend all 20 million on one day. It's like $1 million or $2 million every week, 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It could end up being 10 weeks before you even finish the 20 million. Maybe you can comment to that. And also, there was a statement made that Ms. Mendiola made that I don't believe is true. I spoke to many businesses, and you can comment on that one too, sir.
Yes, Senator. So, there was a statement made yesterday that Mel was saying that our Administrator, Mel Mendiola, was saying that businesses were returning money. It was stated at that meeting. That meeting occurred actually in October of last year. So if you look at the timeline, we had just finished giving out a bulk of the LEAP awards during that time. So what Mel was actually stating, Ms. Mendiola was stating, was that the businesses had yet to come in to apply for forgiveness. You have to remember, they were given 12 months to spend the money. And I think that's an important point with LEAP, was they were obligated to spend every single dollar of the money for eligible business expenses. So now that we are in May of this year, we're starting to see the forgiveness applications come in. And I looked at the records this morning, and of the 233 loans that need to apply for forgiveness, we're in the process of issuing 120 eligible forgiveness. If you did the math on that and just looked at the minimum 60% payroll, those 120 LEAP loans equaled 26.3 million in total money pushed out to the businesses. If we're looking at just 60% on payroll, that is 15.8 million that they proved, at least 60% to Gita, that they spent 15.8 million on payroll. Now, from what we see, most businesses are spending way more than 60% on the payroll costs. Some are as high as 100% went out to payroll. So there's that. On your other question, yes, we do work with the Department of Administration in the issuance of payments. Any money that is appropriated to the program, DOA would tell us, say, for LEAP anyway, our experience was doing a batch of roughly $2 million a week. So we weren't allowed to draw down and submit to them 600 applications totaling 25 million in one go. The accountants at DOA, which we work very closely with, said, let's work at no more than 2 million a week. So we would process everything, batch it up, get it down there in batches of 2 million a week. I would assume that in this program, if and when money is allocated to the program, DOA would work with us and say, maybe it's 2 million every other week, or however they would see fit to properly manage the funds that would be distributed out from the program.
Senator, if I could
Yes, sir.
respond to your first question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the wording that we've got in this bill, and I believe in the GPA bill, works in these bills in these circumstances, because there's a reasonable expectation that funding will be available. It would be obviously not appropriate to simply go ahead and use this recklessly, where there is not an expectation of these revenues, because that would just be that would be just a disappointment to those who might otherwise have expected to receive funding.
Understood. But if the bill was written differently, if it said specifically, either bill says we're going to appropriate the money when we know throughout the discussion the money's not there, then the word deficit spending is in order. But because it's not worded in that fashion, caution, I think we've been very cautious. Steve Guerrero, the director, has always told me, every time we talk about money, he says, Senator, slow down, be cautious. And I always tell him, we're gonna walk the line and make sure that we don't create a deficit. Because I know this body does not want to be recognized as the body, the 37th legislature, that created a deficit. We're not gonna create no deficit. And because the way both bills are written, it prevents a deficit spending. If you don't have the money, you can't spend on it. And because the way it's worded, both bills can simultaneously work. Because why? The other bill is going to talk about 3 months. You got 3 months to make up another $11 million. And at the same time, as funds are being dispersed and being spent, it generates revenue. It generates funding. And then it becomes the priority that any future legislation, we won't be able to tap any anticipated funds until both programs are fulfilled, which basically secures the two programs for the next 3 months or 4 months. And that's how confident I am with both bills. Specifically this one, which I authored, and the second bill that I'm a co-sponsor. And I was very willing to co-sponsor it with the authors, Speaker Terlai, because why? It's back to the people. The LEAP is back to the businesses. How many businesses are you anticipating that could qualify for this program, sir?
We're looking at probably 300 to 400, something thereabouts.
That's correct. And
yes.
the impact of 300 businesses alone is about 7,000 employees. Am I correct?
If you're looking at the larger businesses, yes, you're looking at 5,000 and up in terms of employment figures. I think with the LEAP, the reported figures for the 900 awards we gave out was close to 6,700 employees that they reported on payroll at the time of their application.
And just knowing that, with all this assistance giving to them, would it matter if they get a power credit of $100 and they can't pay their power? They can't pay anything. They can't buy food. They can't even feed themselves. We're doing this. We ensure that they can pay their bills. They can feed their families. And when the power bill comes in and helps them, it gives them additional relief.
Yes, sir. So we are looking at, like I said, in this new program, LEAP had a 60% payroll requirement. We're looking at, because this program is, of course, a smaller, it's still, like I said yesterday, a very significant amount of money, but it is a smaller pot overall. We're looking at reducing the payroll requirement to maybe 40%, because then it gives the business flexibility to pay rent, power, insurance, other business costs. And I will also stipulate that the program specifically states what expenses are allowed and what are not allowed. So we are doing our part to ensure that the business isn't spending on reckless things that would not impact. We want to put it this way: we want them to spend money on what would impact the economy the most and help them stay open and continue to pay their employees.
Thank you for that statement, because that reflects basically what GIDA means.
Yes.
Guam Economic Development Authority.
Yes.
Mr. Byrne, simple question. This one's even simpler. There's a program out there that helps folks that qualify for rental, utilities. Is that program still exist, or are they going to restart it, or anything like that? I'm just curious. It's called the ERA, I think.
ERA program is a federally funded program which is currently in operation and is open for new applicants and for current applicants who haven't exhausted their benefits, correct? And it does provide for payment of utilities as well as the basic rent.
Thank you, sir. I just want to make sure that I ask that question so that the people of Guam watching, por favor, go to DOA or go to whatever office needs to go to, see if you qualify, get the assistance you need because it's a federal program. And on that same note, if we can get these two bills passed, I know there's a brighter future, and then we'll just freeze whatever other appropriation may come up until we deal with the budget. Thank you, sir.
Yes, so the office is on the second floor at the ITC building. The RA office is open all business hours.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Byrne. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator San Augustine. We'll take a brief recess. We're back from recess. We'd like to say thank you to our panel for being here. We'll now release you. Thank you very much for your time over the last several days. We'll take a quick recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. We are now in the third round of comments and amendments. There have been no amendments uploaded to the drive. So if there's anyone wishing to speak on the bill, you have 5 minutes for comments. Senator Duenas, you are recognized.
Citius Masi, Madam Chair. I want to use this time to talk about the many exchanges we had with Department of Administration in particular. And I think it's important when the director goes down the road of talking about how he doesn't want to go back to deficit spending. I was looking forward to in the next round, but I know we're going to handle the bill differently. So I'll just put my comments on the record. The director never had $60 million of EITC during the time that he was the director, that the federal government was fully paying for. That same director never had hundreds of millions of dollars in ACTC funds coming to Guam that never existed under the prior administration. The director didn't have $3 billion of construction funds with the buildup and pouring in of revenue associated with that. The director didn't have over $1.5 billion of rescue money when you put the ARP and the CARES Act together. The director did not have payroll funds that were funneled through in billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, close to $1 billion in payments of payroll to our people, all this largesse coming from the federal government, which is the prime driver of why we have had, along with this legislature's fiscal responsibility, why we have had the ability to enjoy the manna from heaven through the generosity of our national government. So to sit here and try to piously say it's because of some fiscal miracle is an insult to the people of Guam and to this body. Now, why do I make those points? I make those points because we are going to go into another bill that we're going to address where now we have precious resources of taxpayer money where we're going to be funding a return to our people to try to give them a break on their power bill while sitting here, and there's just an absolute resistance to use ARP money that right now 230, and the director tells us about allocated money and the dependency on it. Right now, there's not even an RFP for a new hospital, but we're holding on to $160 million of ARP money. What is it anticipated for? People need relief now. The businesses need relief now. The $5 million that the governor says committed to is already in the bank. It's not taking from ARP to say I'll put $5 million in under ARP and match me with general fund revenues at $15 million. It's already there. Madam Chair, when the governor made her first pronouncement that she was going to set aside money for the new hospital, it was $300 million. Then it went to 250. Then it went to 200. Then it went to 170. Was that the trick? Say I'm going to set this aside and then I'll continue to backfill all of my favorite programs here and tell the legislature, give up taxpayer money to help our businesses. I don't know what we don't understand when we say ARP. I don't know how we can't see what rescue means. Rescue doesn't mean put money in the bank and hold on to it. Rescue means throw the lifeline out there, the life buoy, and rescue. But you know what? As we go through the next bill, and if there's an insistence that no, I will not give additional resources from ARP, that's okay, because I'll vote for both bills. And Governor, you make the decision who you're going to short. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Senator Parkinson.
I just want to say that I support both bills. I think it is imperative that we support our small and local businesses while we wait for the tourism industry to recover. And more critically, I think it's important that we fund the energy credit program to help the average person with their ever-exploding power bills. This temporary measure is appropriate because we expect to have online later in the summer some new power plants that will bring some energy relief to the LEAC. So in that time, if we have to go into deficit spending to help the people of Guam, then let's do that. Let's stop dithering around and get on with it and help the people of Guam. Let's lower their energy bills and let's help our small businesses and let's get to it. With that, I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. Senator Barnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been a pretty interesting last couple days. I would just say, you know, if this leap gets passed, and what I don't really want to see is just a mirror image of the same leap that went out last time, because again, just looking through some of these awards for these grants, and you know, I'll just qualify my upcoming comments by saying, yeah, there are definitely some businesses that are still struggling, that are still in need of assistance, but then, you know, also there are some businesses that are doing really good. And so I don't know if there needs to be an adjustment of the parameters. I don't know if that ship has sailed. But yeah, I'm just not sure that some of awarding some of these businesses, and you know, and I hear the chatter out there, you know, get your application ready because there's another round of LEAP coming, and it's almost like it seems like it's a given that, you know, every business that was awarded a grant from, you know, we talked about this yesterday, the game rooms, the strip clubs, the purveyors of Rolex watches. You know, I just don't want to see that happen again, because while I want to support the businesses, I want to make sure that we're supporting the businesses that actually need the support, especially if now we're getting this stern tongue lashing from our magahaga about, you know, a so-called deficit spending, which is just further for me making this conversation more about pitting LEAP against the ratepayers, which I mean, when it comes down to that, I got to support the ratepayers. But yeah, I just think that we need to go through some of these parameters, and you know, I don't think this LEAP should just be a rubber stamp where you're going to have, you know, all of these people. Granted, it's a lesser amount of money, but I would just ask that they vet this process more, both prior to the awarding and after, because you know, we heard in the testimony that they haven't received a lot of the post-award documentation, and granted, some of it's on the way. But we saw a similar thing with PUA, where you ended up having a bunch of people who it was, you know, questionable whether or not they should have received the PUA benefits. And there was talk about making people pay it back, but at the end of the day, it was just forgiven, you know, which ended up being a freebie. And did any of those people, you know, abuse the system? Were they fraudulent? Quite possibly, yes. And so I just want to avoid these similar circumstances with the LEAP program, because I do want to support the businesses, of course, duh. And I feel like you got to keep saying that, or else you're just going to be painted as anti-business, which I'm definitely not. Right. My businessman colleague back there is chuckling, but you know, it's right. I mean, I just, it's in my nature to ask questions, and I have to echo the comments of Speaker Terlahi. It's, you know, I supported the GPP pay raises because we were told, and part of me had to close an eye on this, the pay raises. We were told that paying out these pay raises was sustainable, that it was not going to jeopardize education, that it was not going to jeopardize public safety, that it was not going to jeopardize health care. And now come to find out that we're getting lectured for deficit spending when we're really just doing what the administration told us to do, to utilize excess revenues to do these things that we're trying to do now. And it's just bizarre to me, this reluctance to pony up more of the ARP funds. I mean, I thought my grandma was tight with her money. Well, this is a whole new level. I'm serious, yeah. I mean, they're, and you heard the testimony. Ed Byrne made it sound like they had to lift look under the fridge over at GITA to come up with this $5 million in ARP funding when, you look at and it's a judgment call really, right? The funds are allocated, right? But could we move stuff around and get creative and maybe use more ARP and then replace it later? Absolutely. Absolutely. We heard very certainly and very convincingly that the LEAP program could be 100% fully funded by American Rescue Plan funds. And so it's just bizarre for me that we received this release out of Adelup when they hold the keys to resolving this situation that's of their own making. They hold the key by ponying up more of the ARP funding. They do that, the people of Guam get the energy relief, and everyone goes home happy. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. Speaker Chirlahi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It has been an interesting discussion with the representatives from the Department of Administration and GITA. And while they testified in favor of the LEAP bill and the energy credit bill, we get a press release today saying that doing both bills would be deficit spending. I find that, I don't know, but questionable, I guess. One of my colleagues used the word insulting. It's, we just received news of pay raises up at Adelup that were, done retroactively, perhaps, with some cabinet members that have not even been come down here for confirmation under the new administration. And in the face of that, we're going to tell the people of Guam that not enough money for you to get a $100 a month relief for power. Or for some of these businesses who are critical, and I thought the program was supposed to be centered on businesses critical to attract tourists back, because that's what we needed. Not to keep, some of these other businesses in place that I don't think are attracting tourists. It might be the opposite. I'm not sure, but I am hoping that GITA, based on our comments and today, is going to look carefully at their program. They have complete flexibility under this LEAP bill to implement a program that they deem best for Guam, they and the governor, and I hope that they will be selective. We have businesses receiving in excess of $300,000 that are like luxury items, luxury. And I don't know how that helps the people of Guam, except for, GRTs, yes. But still, I believe there are critical businesses that have not been reached by this program. That's what we have heard. And we were hoping that this new round is going to try to reach those businesses in need of help and that are going to truly impact the quality of life for the people of Guam. And we've also heard their testimony that there are some businesses in aggregate receiving $1 million in this general fund aid. Could be ARP aid, it's up to the governor. And because they control the program and they control the parameters, I think they should use the ARP and tie it into recovery and tie it into need and tie it into what we need for Guam's recovery. People who need power bills, I'm just talking about it because it's relevant to this bill, because they're pitting the two bills against each other. GPA has admitted they are charging a LEAC rate that is at an all-time high. And no, the power plant doesn't come online this summer, not at all. That power plant's not coming online for several years. So we're still vulnerable. Even though they've put in a petition to reduce LEAC, we're still vulnerable to the PUC saying yes or no. We're still vulnerable to oil prices changing and then them going back up or going higher. Still vulnerable. The $100 is really a very minimal amount to allow these families. And the effect is, if we can tell them this today, they don't have to decide what not to pay for their children in the next coming months. It's really that. It's to give them that assurance from the government of Guam that while we're giving out pay raises, we are going to take care of those who are in need of food and power. Simple as that. Somebody mentioned that, some of these families, just like the businesses, were eligible for rent relief and received all kinds of federal funded programs for relief, for rent, for utilities and other purposes. Yes, individuals are also eligible for ERA, but let me tell you some of the eligibility criteria for that program. You have to be making no more than $65,000 for a 5-person family household. 5 persons, $65,000. 4 persons, $61,000. I think that's a very minimal amount to try to take care of a family of 4. And so I don't think this covers very many people, and that's why this relief that we're trying to give to businesses and to power consumers is to take care a much larger group of families on Guam. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Speaker Therese. Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I wholeheartedly support this bill. Likewise, I equate it to be a twin bill to the power subsidy bill for our people as well. You know, as previously said, the ARP, the American Rescue Plan, clearly states that the LEAP program absolutely qualifies for this. And again, when the past couple of days, Department of Administration was here saying that, yeah, this justifies and it could be paid out. And then, as was read earlier this morning from the governor's office, cautioning this body to be careful about deficit spending. I'm like, wow, deficit spending? A few weeks back, we were here talking about pay raises. That is, it's not limited to a couple months, a few months. It's forever. Yet, one government official after another said, oh, no, we can sustain it absolutely forever. We can, absolutely. The trend is there. We can sustain this. But when it comes to, again, the people that are still hurting, the businesses that are still hurting, oh, be careful. For these few months that you're going to help them, be careful. You're going to go into deficit spending. Like, wow. Where did that come from? And we're looking at, where these monies are being allocated to. Some of the expenditures already. I'm like, really? yet we have nothing, or very cautious about giving it to businesses. Now, and remember, these businesses are legitimate businesses. They're licensed businesses, whether there be game rooms or strip clubs. That's the oldest profession anyway, Chris. Time tested. Time tested. And supply chain. But they're legitimate businesses. And again, as was said by the Department of Administration, these are businesses that qualified based on, again, the loss of business and activity and all that. So, again, they're legitimate businesses. We're getting calls, our offices are getting calls from businesses as well that have not qualified, have not recovered, are still hurting. I was at a restaurant last night, a popular restaurant, and I ordered some things, so we no longer serve that, sir. Really? It's right here in the menu. Our other location is the only one that serves that, sir, because we don't have any employees anymore. And if you want something to drink, sir, you got to get it yourself. Huh? Yeah, there's self-serve water, self-serve tea, and if you want a bottled drink, just go to our cooler and get it. We don't have enough staff to serve anymore. Business is hurting. And so I'm like, wow, we were just talking about this today, and businesses are still hurting. Yeah, they had a few people in there, but quite a few have not recovered. And there is a process that they go through in regards to qualify. And it was mentioned earlier, yeah, there are some businesses, and great, that they're thriving. And they'll go through the process if they don't qualify based on again, the recovery rate or not, they will be turned down. But in general, again, the American Rescue Plan is there for the businesses. And so, Governor, figure it out. Don't, we're not the ones that are pitting these two bills against each other. It's the administration that's pitting these two bills. I wholeheartedly support this bill as well as the other bill that we'll be discussing, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Brown.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. As time goes on, all things come to surface, and I think we're getting there with regards to how, our pandemic funds have been spent. Certainly when you look down the list, you got a lot of questions why certain things are covered and other things are not. And the irony is things that can directly benefit our public, our people, the previous bill to help our local businesses who still need opportunity to bridge over. Granted, some businesses have actually flourished during the pandemic, but that's not the majority of businesses. We still have many others in the tourism industry that, in spite of, the recent influxion of tourists from Korea, we still don't have the level of tourists that we had in January 2019 that was helping sustain our local economy. And now also, as we've had twice previously, and I've supported both previous legislation to provide funding to offset our power bill. And some people say, hey, that money should be put into more long-term benefit. And I agree. I think there's many things in our infrastructure in the government that serves the public that certainly would have benefited substantially and more long-term with regards to these funds. But at the same time, this legislation and the previous two actually directly benefited every single household on Guam, even though some people may say, oh, it's a nominal amount. But, it's one of those moments when every little bit counts, especially when we've seen such increased cost in our everyday lives. And certainly, even us in the legislature, we're not immune from it. We still have power bills, we have mortgages, we have obligations to meet. We do go and do our grocery shopping. That's why Senator Blas and I always run into each other at Happy Mart on a regular basis. To see the increase of prices, and not everybody gets the pay raise. There are people that are taking home less. And while we kind of talk about them, the bigger picture of how government has moved forward really has not taken them into consideration. I'd hate to think that the only way really the administration is moving on these issues is when they get to issue the press releases and when they get to spend all that federal money and all those commercials, those numerous commercials and print ads every single day that we saw that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars combined because they wanted to take credit for federal money that was intended for our people. Money that could have directly gone and benefited them rather than the advertising before and after the election about our greatness and how wonderful the people of Guam should be pleased that we're here to serve them. You know, as we move forward, and again, you know, I could be wrong, but, you know, it's the advantage of being around long enough. Everything that comes around goes around, and you eventually are going to see, as we are. I mean, a month ago, the money was flying. And I don't even know why we bother bringing these administrative officials down, because I don't get a straight answer to a very straight question. But we're going to start seeing the cracks in the revenues coming into the government of Guam, and we're going to start seeing that a lot of the previous decisions have been made. You know, when they say the chickens come home to roost or the roosters come home to roost, they're coming. And there's going to be a lot of things we're not funding. And in the greatness of government, we're already starting to see, and colleagues, certainly I encourage you to have more oversight hearings. We're already seeing the cracks in government. We're already seeing where services are deficient. We're already seeing where critical services in this government are not being properly funded. And you got to ask why, you know, at a time when money's flowing from the skies and the administration wants us, and some members of this current body want us to think that the money's flowing and we should just appropriate left, right, up, and down. Well, I think you're going to start seeing when the times are tough, and that's the standard in the government. That's not something new. Perhaps some of you newer, younger ones are going to realize what it's like when you have to make tough decisions, when you actually have to cut the baby in half, because there's not enough money to go around for all the critical things that we want to fund or need to fund, especially when essential things are not being addressed and are not being provided to our people, as we're starting to see now as more of these hearings go on. So I certainly support both of these bills. You know, the ARP money that was intended for this purpose, unfortunately, as the governor continues to hoard this money rather than using it for where the direct need is, you know, we're going to have to see what happens as the clock keeps ticking, whether or not that money is actually going to be put into something that's going to directly benefit our people, when for so long in this last several years, critical things that could directly benefit our people are not being used. That money's not being used for that purpose. And I look down at government agencies, I got to wonder what the official connection is, you know, to the pandemic, especially when we look at millions of dollars that are being poured in, that's not going to be there next year. So I'm really curious how we're going to fund a lot of government operations that have been subsidized. And this legislature is not demanded of the administration to clearly let the people of Guam know how that money is being spent. So with that, Madam Chair, I have no further comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Fisher, do you have an inquiry? Vice Speaker Tina Munoz-Barnes.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, as I share the same sentiments as the previous speaker, I too want to chime in and say I support this measure and thank the author for providing me or giving me the opportunity to be a co-sponsor. But I'd be remiss if I didn't also note, and I know we didn't talk about it, support the other bill that's coming up. And I think that in the efforts of the presentation that was provided for us for the last couple of days, I literally think that we should just put both bills down into the third reading and vote on it right away. But I know we have to go through a process, but I do want to chime in that even as what was provided with us today and what was given to us, I guess, as a press release, I think that we really need, or I personally feel that we have done our due diligence and we have asked a lot of the right questions, and I think that this is what we need to show our community, that we continue to work for them, and that in the efforts of making sure that there is sustainability within our community, and if we can provide those resources to them, then let's give it to them. So I support both measures, Madam Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of Santa Mossy. No amendments at this time. I yield back to you.
Thank you very much. Senator Siniclis.
President, hi. Thank you, Madam Chair. You know what these two bills do is it's an investment in us. It's an investment in our people. That's what it really is. I sometimes have to remind myself and my wife that if it wasn't for the first economic stimulus that we got, I don't think I would be sitting here. So, you know, whenever we get a chance to help businesses and realize their dreams, and so they can work hard and produce, so that we all can provide for not only for our people but our economy and our families, you know, then let's do so. I had the very honored privilege of having met with the Japanese consulate who came to visit me, and he was talking that once the floodgates open, you know, he would like to have more attractions here so that when the Japanese tourists do come back, that Guam remains a viable, wonderful place to visit. And as we speak, the president of GVB, more fondly known as Uncle Carl, is over there right now on stage speaking to try to get our Japanese tourists back. And I also heard that I think tomorrow President Biden will be loosening the travel restrictions. So we have to put our best foot forward and try to stay ahead of the game and give these businesses the fighting chance to come back. Because the businesses are the backbone of our economy. And with the power bill, you know, that's another great thing, power relief. You know, let's invest in our people as how they invested us in the first stimulus. So I'm just waiting to vote yes on both these bills. And I'd like to thank the author and my colleagues for supporting these two measures. It's a wonderful thing. It's a good thing. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator Siniclis. Senator Fisher.
Good morning. Yes, again. I got something to say. All right. This isn't, I don't support this bill. I didn't get elected to fleece the taxpayers. The truth of the matter is there's at least $228 million sitting in an account gathering interest at 3%. $228 million plus every year, 6.5 million comes into the coffer. Because it's getting compounded probably monthly, that amount will continue to grow. Yet the governor won't touch it. She won't tell us what she wants to use the money for. We have our suspicions, but she won't tell us. The problem is she's come to us and said, give me $15 million for the LEAP funding. She wants the taxpayers to give her another $15 million, and then she creates a false tension in this body between the legislature and the executive branch, where we are scrambling to figure out how we can pay for this amount of money, when all we have to do is cross the street and look in the Bank of Guam, and there it is. There it is. But instead, she wants us to devote tens of millions of dollars, ultimately, to a program which has never been audited. It's never been audited. We don't know if it works. It's just money is flowing, money is falling from the sky. And she wants us to invest again in it, but we don't know if it works. We suspect it does, but we don't know that. And she is willing to let the taxpayers take the risk on this program, and she won't. She won't. It's unconscionable that the taxpayers are bearing this burden. I'm just going to repeat that. I don't know how many people are watching this, but all of us need to understand that we do have the money. We do. We've got 228 million at least, and since Eagles Field, due to her secrecy, went down, we've got another $168 million. So for us to walk around, the government of Guam to walk around pleading hunger and poverty is false. The money's there. The taxpayers shouldn't be paying for it. The money was specifically created for our use to do a program just like LEAP. And the federal government gave us that money. And she won't use it. She wants the taxpayers to reach into their own purses, pull out the money, and fund this. I just, you know, it's mind-boggling that she would even propose something like this. It's unconscionable. I haven't heard, in 2 days, I haven't heard a single argument why she won't use the ARP funds, except for she doesn't have to. That's all I've heard. I mean, you would expect to hear that sort of counter-argument in a grade school classroom. But her argument is she doesn't have to use the money. Yes, she does have to use the money. It's not her money. It's money devoted to the use of the taxpayers of Guam. She has an obligation to use that money for programs she thinks are appropriate, such as the LEAP program. I can't emphasize enough, ma'am, that it's already been paid for. And the money is in the bank. Yet she comes to us and asks for money. She doesn't ask us for it, asks the taxpayers for it. You know, when I began speaking, I said that I didn't get elected to this body to fleece the taxpayer. That's not what they want me to do here, is to just take money out of their hands. $41 million program and no audit. Governor, if you come back to this body in good faith and explain to me and others why you are not using this money for the very purpose it's devoted to, for the very purpose the American taxpayers cobbled it together and gave it to us, then I will help you. I will support you. But I will not support this fleecing of the taxpayers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. And lastly, Senator San Agustin.
Thank you. Okay. On this bill, Bill 75-37, we've heard from the panel off the bat about 300 applicants, 7,000 employees. We know for a fact on the next bill, Bill 83, it's talking about impacting 51,000 homeowners. And when one of my colleagues brought up, we asked her to give 15 million, or she asked us. No, she didn't. I'm the author of the bill. I asked her if she can find ways to provide some support. She identified 5 million. It's in her state of address. So let's just end that issue. Now, in reference to ARP, yes, it would be nice if she could use it. But it's like any one of you. If you have the money, I'm not going to tell you how you use your money. And then we move on from there. Let's settle this bill, and we move on from there. And I'm in full support. I asked my colleagues that have already mentioned they're in support of this bill, and they're in support of the next bill, Bill 83. I think we've had sufficient discussion on both bills that we can move on. And with that, Madam Chair, I move that Bill 75-37, as amended by the Committee on General Government Operation and Appropriation, with the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole, be placed on the third reading file.
On the motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move we rise from the Committee of the Whole with the recommendation that Bill 75-37 LS, as amended by the Committee on General Government Operation and Appropriation, be placed on the third reading file.
On the motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. We are in recess.
Guam is back from recess. Senator San Augustine, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to report back to the body after the deliberation of Bill 75-37 LS as amended by the Committee on General Government Operation and Appropriation with the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole to place on the third reading file.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're still on second reading. We're now on Bill number 83-37 LS. Senator Shelton.
Colleagues, I guess we'll move right on to the next bill. I'm going to address the speaker at this time. Speaker Therese Lahi, you are recognized on Bill 83.
Jesus Masi, I'd like to move to substitute Bill number 83-37 LS. A copy is being passed out. This substitute version changes the amount from the fiscal year 2023 to 10.799 million, and it adds a new section to the bill that says, notwithstanding any other provision of law, rule, or regulation, the appropriated sum set forth in this act shall be immediately transferred to the Department of Administration as soon as such funds become available for the purpose of funding the established program in Azuda Pari Tautauta Energy Credit Program as established by Public Law 36-106. Those are the changes in the substitute version.
Yeah, so before I call the motion, Madam Speaker, just for the record's sake, can you go ahead and read the title and the sponsor for the record?
Yes, so the substitute version title is, this is Bill 83-37 LS, introduced by Teresa M. Terlai and Joe S. San Augustine. It's an act to appropriate $15,581,367 from fiscal year 2022 general fund revenues collected in excess of the adopted levels enumerated in Public Law 36-54 as amended, and $10,799,633 from fiscal year 2023 general fund revenues collected in excess of the adopted levels enumerated in Public Law 36-107 as amended, to the Guam Power Authority for a 5-month extension to the Programa Azuda Pari Tautauta Energy Credit Program relative to providing customers with another $500 credit towards their account.
On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing or seeing none, motion carries. Speaker Terlai, you are recognized.
Mrs. Mossy, I'd like to move to place the substituted bill number 83-37 LS onto the third reading, and I'd like to discuss that motion.
Sure. Yes, Madam Speaker, I will allow that, but I think we need another motion to wait.
Oh, sure.
I'm going to, at this time, thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I'll recognize Senator Joe San Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make a motion, notwithstanding the House rules, that we waive the Committee of the Whole requirement, and that we just move into the discussion of Bill 83-37, because we had sufficient discussion on Bill 75-37.
On that motion, without any objections, motion carries. Speaker Terlai, I will address you at this time. So
I'm moving to place the bill on the third reading, and I'd like to discuss this bill. So, Bill number 83 would give would extend the current program that gave $100 per month credit to every residential consumer of GPA, power bills, a power bill credit of $100 for a total of 5 months for a total of $500. And this is necessary to begin today because the last program ended in April. So they've received their April credits on their last bills, and we need to pass this in order for them to receive credit in May and going forward. We can afford to give credit from the funding sources named, which are excess revenues from FY22, which have been confirmed by DOA and BBMR to contain the $15 million as appropriated in this bill. That's from FY22 excess revenues. And we're also proposing to use a $10.7 million from FY23 excess revenues. And as we've discussed earlier this week in the Committee of the Whole, there is actually $18 million in excess revenues for FY23 currently, and they expect to continue to receive approximately $10 million for the remaining, each month for the remaining months in the fiscal year. So I believe Mr. Burns said it was sustainable, those amounts to be projected. And so I believe that if we do have that type of excess revenues, that this should be a priority of the government of Guam. I think we're all in agreement, my colleagues, we've always been in agreement that ongoing inflation rates continue to result in the high costs of food, goods, household goods, housing, utilities. And they present challenges to the quality of life of our people, especially low-income families, but really all families. And those who spend their earnings on necessities such as food, utilities, and rent are very much challenged these days to make ends meet. And we are told that power costs, even despite a potential reduction in LEAC, will continue to rise in the summer just because of increasing heat and increasing use because schools are out and the children have to stay home. And so I would just like to prioritize this as a legislature priority, that excess funds go towards this program and that we give this relief to the people of Guam as soon as possible. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Speaker Chalahi. On the main motion, are there anyone wishing to speak? Anyone wishing to speak? Senator Will Parkinson, you are recognized at this time. Please proceed.
I just wanted to stand in full support of this measure. Relief for the people of Guam is necessary and urgent with record high LEAC rates, and this bill would provide temporary relief until we see a potential LEAC reduction in the future. Whatever it takes to get the people of Guam this relief, we should do. I had promised during the election that I would help to put money in people's pockets and help reduce their power rates. And with that, I stand in full support of this measure, come hell or high water. So for the people, let's do it. With that, I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Joseph Augustine, I will recognize you at this time. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the co-sponsor of this bill, I thank the author because, this would be considered the third round. And the author of this bill was also involved in the other rounds. And it's just amazing how some may say, be cautious of deficit spending. We're very cautious. And I'm just thankful that on their side, they're maintaining some fiscal management. We're doing our part. And I ask my colleagues that we support this bill, we send it to the governor and ask her to sign it. And then we move on from there. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Senator San Augustine. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Speaker Chalahi, you may close. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Chris Barnett, I didn't see you. You may proceed at this time.
Thank you, madam. I was just surprised that more of my colleagues didn't want to speak out about this great measure. It really is long overdue. As you know, I've been hearing a lot of people talk about the rising cost of power. I know the power bills that came in this month, there was a little bit of a mullard on the people of Guam because we had the power folks come out and talk about the LEAC and it was going to drop. Obviously, that didn't happen in time, and now this latest bill that came out, leku woe. And so this relief couldn't come at a better time. Is it all we can do? I don't think so. I wish we could extend it, double it, make it a year. But I just don't know if the will or the funding is here, and I just don't want to get in any more trouble with the governor, lieutenant governor today. They already wrote one press release. And so, yeah, of course, obviously, it's a no-brainer, stand in full support of this measure, this much-needed relief for our people and all the ratepayers. And I would just say, you know, with the $228 million in ARP, yes, we understand it has been allocated. We also understand that the governor in all of her power and might, and lieutenant governor as well, can easily reprogram this funding. And I would just call on them to do that and to find ways to use it for more assistance for our people and leave the general fund stuff to us. And so, yeah, of course, we stand in full support. Eagerly looking forward to another round after this one is complete. And so, again, I just ask for the support of my colleagues for this great measure. And it feels good to be able to stand up here today after all the questions and doubts about this head-on collision that just a few hours ago was the LEAP and the ratepayer relief. It's nice to see that we avoided a crash course with both these measures, and it looks like we're going to be able to get creative in funding them both. Thank you, Madam.
You're very welcome, Senator Barnett. Anyone else? Minority Leader, you're recognized. I do apologize. Senator Frank Blasio, I recognize you were first. Please. Sorry about that, brother. Senator Frank Blas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I purposely didn't stand my final remarks in the previous bill because I wanted to save it for this bill. And I have to agree that, you know, I appreciate and I applaud, you know, my colleagues coming together and trying to figure out how we can get a penny from squeezing a nickel out of 2 pennies. But, you know, I was taken aback, just like some of my colleagues in their previous talks, of the governor's office characterizing what we have been doing over the last couple of days as deficit spending. But she's right. We're spending so that we can take care of the deficits that exist within our community. That's what we were doing. But it's kind of sad when you say that you caution about the deficit spending while you sit on $228 million that could have gone just exactly for what we were arguing and what we were deliberating about. This discussion should not have been happening. We didn't have to come in here and talk about this. We could have come in here and talk about other things that admire our community. We can come in here and talk about how we can use that money to be able to fix our hospital, help our schools, reduce crime rate. But no, we had to come in here and be cautioned about deficit spending from monies that was taken from the backs of our people, while $228 million is sitting in the bank. I'm going to continue this, $228 million. This bill itself is going to cost about 26 million. The bill previously is going to cost about 20 or 15 million because she's supposedly going to donate $5 million from that fund. $46 million. Yet she has $228 million sitting in the account. It takes me back to the time when she first received the money, or was told that she was going to first receive the money, when many of us in here were invited to this conference, to this meeting, so that we can discuss how we can share in the responsibility and share in the opportunity to be able to help our people with the funding that was going to be coming in. Then to be told afterwards, oh, legislature, you have nothing to do with this money. I'll use it as I please. You know, another person that I think should have taken offense to that press release about deficit spending was their DOA director himself, Mr. Edward Byrne, because he yesterday came before this body and testified there is enough money to be able to provide not just for the LEAP, but also for the power rate reduction. One has to ask the question, does the left hand tell the right hand what they're doing in the administration? Or did you purposely throw Mr. Edward Byrne under the bus? Or worse yet, did you allow him to lie to us? Because the question is, based on Edward Byrne's testimony yesterday and the press release from today, who's not telling us the truth? The truth is, there's $228 million sitting in an account. The truth is that businesses need the help to continue to survive. The truth is that employees would appreciate this funding so they can continue to put food on their table and pay for a power bill, which, by the way, this bill will allow them to have at least some temporary relief. So there is some truth to that. We are spending to reduce a deficit in the community. The deficit is, this shouldn't have happened because of $228 million still sitting in an account. What now of other instances down the road? What happens if in a couple days, in a few days, they're going to bring to light that there's going to be funding needed for this program or for that program, or to pay this off or that off? Are we going to be accused again of deficit spending? No, we're using the only tools and the only resources that we have to be able to do this. Because obviously she doesn't want to do it. She could have been magnanimous and said, thank you, senators, but you know what? I have $228 million that I can use so that I can be able to assist ratepayers with their power bill, assist businesses who are still struggling, so that you can better use that money so that you can make sure that our hospital can get rid of its $37 million deficit. so that our schools can be much safer for our children, so that our streets can be much safer for our families. That's where the deficit is at. So if this is the only tool that we have right now, so that we can provide some assurances, I stand in full support of addressing the deficit. But while we're struggling to deal with $47 million that these two bills need, there's $228 million sitting in an account. Where's the deficit now? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minority Leader. Senator Chris Duenas.
Madam Speaker. Promise to be short. As my good friend Senator Barnett mentioned, you know, it was interesting how other colleagues weren't rising to make comments about this bill. The reason why, Madam Speaker, is normally we don't even allow considering other bills when we're talking about a bill that's currently before us. But because we were put in this position to basically have to pit these bills against each other or figure out how they were both going to work harmoniously, I think there was a lot of latitude granted by this body. I fully support this bill and its intention, and I agree. We need to continue to find ways until power rates can come down to a reasonable level to help our people at all endeavors and ventures. But I wanted to put the final statement that I have on the record here, Madam Speaker, to say these two bills pass. I'm not worried about us deficit spending. That's up to the governor whether she's going to deficit spend or not. Because I know we've been beating this horse for the last couple of days, but the governor doesn't have to deficit spend if she just uses the money that's at her discretion to support the bill that's passed for the $20 million. She can support this power credit all day long, and just because we passed a bill that has $15 million in general fund appropriations, matching the $5 million that already exists at GITA, that they said that the governor said she's putting aside for this program, it doesn't mean she has to spend the general fund revenues. If DOA is explaining to her what the cash management issues are, if BBMR is tracking, if the CRER is not tracking, and it's below, all she has to do is just meander right over there to the bank and do a transfer. So I want to make it very clear to the public and everybody who's been watching us for the last couple of days, that press release from the governor's office is erroneous. Because there is no way this legislature is going to deficit spend. We don't manage the cash. And unfortunately, the way things are set up, we have no say when it comes to ARP funds, but she does. So Governor, one more time, I want to put it on the record. If there's anyone to deficit spend, it will be yourself. Because when both of these bills pass, you have plenty of opportunity, if the money's not tracking, to just once again head on over to the bank, take out a withdrawal, and pay the people of Guam. Madam Chair.
Buen provecho, Senator Duenas. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Speaker, Senator Lahan, you are recognized. Guys, it's already 12:10.
It's going to be short. It'll be short. Thank
You're
you.
recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, earlier, yes, we were warned not to deficit spend, but I don't know how the governor is coming about with her math, because the $228 million that's sitting in the bank and carving out $47 million from that, in my calculation, the math that I learned, that leaves us with $141 million in surplus. So this does not result in a deficit spending, Madam Speaker. And again, as was stated earlier, both these bills basically qualify under the American Rescue Plan to be able to help our people. And again, when it comes down to helping our people, I mean, we were warned, watch out deficit spending. But again, a few weeks ago, we were told, based on the raises, that, oh, it's sustainable. No worries, years and years, forever it'll be sustainable. But when it comes to helping our people, be careful, legislature, you're going to be deficit spending. But again, as was said, there's $228 million sitting a few blocks away. And we're just asking that $47 million combined with these two bills that be carved out of that. And again, I don't know how carving out $47 million combined with these two bills leaves us with a deficit. That, my calculation, that will leave us with $141 million. And that's not by far a deficit. That's still money that's in there that I don't know what else is going to be used for other than what the federal government had guided us to use. But with that, Madam Chair, I know we're past 12 o'clock and folks are getting hungry here. But thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator Lujan. Senator Tom Fisher on the motion.
Thank you, Chair. I support this bill, and I support the comments of my colleagues who have also risen in support of it. This bill actually helps the taxpayers and doesn't take money surreptitiously out of their pockets. So this is a good bill. Let's help the people. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Senator Fisher. If there's no one else wishing to speak on the main motion, I'll recognize Speaker Therese Terlai for the closing. You are recognized.
Thank you. And thank you to my colleagues for their support and their remarks in support. I very much appreciate some of the cleverness of those remarks, especially the deficit, how we are in a deficit in our community. I agree. It is perplexing, again, that today, in the middle of our deliberations with her fiscal team, that we received a letter from the governor and the lieutenant governor, or a press release, not even a letter or any direct communication through her team, but we receive a press release accusing the legislature of deficit spending. And she says there are not enough funds, and this is poor fiscal policy and reverts Gov Guam into past habitual deficit spending. These statements are false. False. Her representative, unless we're supposed to not take their word for it, unless they are lying to us, has told us there is enough money. This measure directs the use of the money that they have told us is available. That is the legislature's power, is to direct the money's use. The actual spending of it, like my colleague pointed out, that's up to them. If they're going to ignore this bill and not pay the power credit, or they're going to use it for additional pay raises up at Adelup, that's totally up to them. But we, by the legislature, are directing how we believe this money should be prioritized. And we are being transparent. The governor's team, earlier weeks before we got back to this session, stressing people out, telling them we need to take the money back from the Department of Education in order to pay power relief. Outrageous. Outrageous. While spending continues in the government, as we can see, and we are taking care of certain people in this government very well, and we leave families who are struggling out in the cold. This is taxpayers' funds. These are general funds. They come from our taxpayers. I say we give it back to them as relief. We make it very clear to the governor that this is our priority as a legislature. And the nonsense about deficit spending and the nonsense about taking money from the Department of Education and the nonsense that there is not enough money has to end. Madam Speaker.
On the motion, Madam Speaker, on the motion to place the bill on the third reading, please.
Yes, I renew my motion to place the bill on third reading as substituted.
On that motion, Senator San Augustine, on the motion to place bill number 83-37 LS as substituted on the third reading voting file, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Senator San Augustine, I'll recognize you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Being that neither Bill 75 or 83 has any amendment, notwithstanding the House rule, that we move without engrossment, that we move to immediately vote for the two bills, and let's send this downtown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that, I know that that's a motion to vote without engrossment, but before.
That's correct.
Colleagues, we do have some nominations that we should have put on. So give me a moment. Speaker Terlaya, I'll recognize
I move to go, notwithstanding the rules, go back to legislative concurrences.
Thank you very much. On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. Secretary Shelton, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move to place the nomination of the Honorable Mayor Robert Hoffman to serve as a member of the Guam Visitors Bureau Board in the voting file.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Good afternoon, Speaker. I move to place from the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning the nomination of Daniel A. Taiting Fong to serve as a member of the Guam Environmental Protection Agency Board of Directors onto the voting file.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place from the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture the nomination of Antoinette M. Kleiner to serve as a member of the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority Board of Trustees to the voting file.
Sorry. On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We've completed legislative concurrences and our second reading folder. We are now on third reading. We will take just a second. We're going to take a 10-minute recess while the clerks get the folders out to you for our third reading file, and we will vote today. All right, so we'll come back in 10 minutes, 10-minute recess. Oh, sorry, Senator Shelton? Oh, yeah, okay, so 10-minute recess.